The other day I posed a question. What do a brand new shiny turbocharged Porsche, a high-performance turbocharged snowmobile, and the minds of impressionable youth have to do with the future of snowmobiling in America? If you'd like to know, then I invite you to join me for a story today, something a little different. Good morning, Snow West. I'm Christopher, forum admin for snowwest.com, and your host for today's story time on Snow West. It is 6:18 a.m. So when I say good morning, I mean good morning. I've been driving for about 18 minutes now. I am on my way down south to Lehi, Utah, where we're going to take delivery of a brand new Porsche this morning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's wind this back and start the story at the very beginning. Just a quick heads up. Today's going to be a long form video, just so everybody's real clear. I've got a 3.5 hour drive ahead of me, and I thought I'd take advantage of this time to do something different, just tell you guys a story. I gave a lot of thought to our discussion a week ago about what we can do to grow the sport. And as I was thinking over that, I looked at myself. I used myself as the best example for my own life. And I thought about part of the journey that I've been on, and how does that journey possibly represent what might happen to other young men or young women, those that we're looking to bring into the sport and introduce to snowmobiling. So as I'm driving down south, and I have many hours on my hands this morning, I'm going to spin you a little bit of a yarn, I suppose. If you're watching this on Facebook, flip your phone sideways. If you've got a laptop or a notepad, or better yet, on your desktop, you might want to jump over to YouTube. You'll see a much higher quality 4K UHD version of this, and I'll put some links in there to the Snow West forums if you want to jump in and really have a conversation with me. One of the nice things about the forums, unlike Facebook or YouTube, is they are set up very well to have an actual discussion back and forth, especially over time. This video, I think, will probably have legs, and it's going to last a long while. So let's roll the calendar backwards a few years. Let's say maybe 45 years ago. So let's put the date at, give or take, 1980. Back in 1980, I was a teenager, still very much in high school, at a little school called Corona Del Mar in Newport Beach, California. And back in those young and early developmental days of my life, before I had any idea what was actually going on in the world, I was a typical young, impressionable teenage boy who was very much caught up in cars and things that go fast. And I had two uncles that played a major role in my life. One was Uncle Mike, the other was Uncle Doug. Uncle Mike was a total vehicle sports guy and was a primary owner in an organization called IROC, the International Race of Champions. Now, whether or not you know what IROC is will have a lot to do with your age. Those of you that are probably 45 or 50 and above will instantly recognize that name and probably associate it with a couple of cars that Chevrolet offered, especially the Camaro back in the 80s. Those of you that are younger won't have any idea. IROC was a race that went around the United States that took the very best race drivers from a variety of different race styles and put them in identically matched Porsches and competed head-to-head to see who was actually the best driver. So on weekends from time to time, Uncle Mike would come and take his young nephew, and we'd go out to the Riverside International Raceway and watch the Porsches race. And this was a fabulous, fabulous thing to do when you were a young teenage boy. It was a lot of fun. I had an absolute blast being around the sports cars, being around the drivers, being around the pits, because my uncle made sure that I had access to all the fun places at the right times. Now, Uncle Mike was probably 23 years my senior, and Uncle Doug was about 10 years my senior. And the two guys could not have been more different. Uncle Doug, at that point in his life, was a car salesman. He was young, he was a musician, He was much closer to my age, and he was the one that I spent most of my free time with growing up. I was close to Uncle Doug. Uncle Mike was more of the icon that Mom held out, said, you ought to be like Uncle Mike, Christopher. So one afternoon, Uncle Doug shows up with, you guessed it, a brand new, shiny, turbocharged Porsche. Back in the day, 45 years ago, a 930 Porsche Turbo was just about as exotic got. It was one of the sexiest, fastest, best handling cars you could get your hands on, and pretty uncommon back at the time. Porsches were around, but the new 930 Turbo was an exotic. And I don't remember what the situation was, why he showed up with it or what he was doing, but I remember him showing up and asking me if I'd like to go for a ride the new Porsche. And being the fine young man that I was, my answer was, oh, hell yeah, I want to go for a ride. And I remember hopping in this little car, and I think we were down on Pacific Coast Highway maybe. And we took off down Pacific Coast, and the car was amazing. I mean, it really was. It was just everything you would expect a fine German sports car to be. And then he put his foot in the throttle and just hammered it. And I remember that visceral sense of acceleration for the first time in my life just pinned my head back as that thing took off. And then the turbo spooled up, and it was like you're in a rocket ship. Now I understand. 45 years ago, that car probably had a few hundred horsepower. I'm going to guess in the 250 range was probably all it put out back then. But the car only weighed a couple of 1,000 pounds tops. They were incredibly light back then, so the performance was huge. And as I mentioned in an earlier intro, and this is a real key point, people don't remember what you said. People don't remember what you did. But people absolutely remember how you made them feel. And I remember 45 years later how I felt going for that drive with Uncle Doug. I felt overwhelmed. I felt blown away. It left an indelible mark in my brain that 45 years later, I still remember very, very vividly, very clearly. It was an amazing experience, an amazing feeling. One that I have simply never forgotten. What I experienced, I think, can best be said to be joy and total excitement. You know, my excitement meter was pegged all the way over there at 100%. It could not have been more exciting. It could not have been a more joyful experience. And I think those two attributes, more than anything else, are why I remember it so well 45 years later. That was the moment that my uncle, probably accidentally, probably not on purpose or intention, put a little piece of bait in front of me and set a hook in my mouth. And it's taken 45 years to reel that hook in, but it's been there. That seed has been growing for decades, decades and decades. It's been growing slowly, carefully, lovingly, coming to fruition, which will eventually lead us to today. But along the journey, I grew up, went to college, got a degree, joined the Army, got married, raised a family of 4, and finally ended up settling here in southeast Idaho, where I was able to follow up on my love and ended up with snowmobiling. But again, I want to take you along the whole journey, the whole story, as it were. And that's going to take us a couple of minutes. And I'm driving on Interstate 15. And those of you that live out here know that our interstates only have 2 seasons. We have winter and we have road construction. And I keep going from section to section of paved to unpaved to paved again. And we're coming up to the next section of unpaved. 10 miles of road construction later, and we're back. All right, so let's continue this little story here. When I was growing up, I was into scuba diving. That was pretty much my hobby in Southern California. And so when I went off to college, I chose to go to the University of Colorado in Boulder. And when I was there, I was exposed to my very first snowmobile. There was a weekend opportunity where I went up to one of the ski resorts that had sleds and signed up for a day-long tour. I'd never been on a snowmobile, really had no experience with snow to speak of. But living in Boulder, we got a lot of snow. And I went up on this first ride, and it was a whole lot of fun. I don't remember a lot of details, but I remember it was a touring sled. There were groomed trails. We went up high. It was cold. I was wearing, total renter gear, big baggy zip-up suit kind of thing, the bright red helmet, the whole bit. But again, another seed was planted. I had fun. I remember enjoying that trip. In general, I like being out in the mountains. I like the cold air. I like being up in the high elevations. I had fun. But snowmobiling still wasn't something I did. I didn't know anybody who was a sledder. And so time passed. I graduated, got my degree, joined the military, went back to North Carolina. And in North Carolina, I went back to scuba diving. While I was serving in the Army, I was in the 82nd Airborne. I was a combat medic in the parachute regiment. And on weekends, I'd go down to northern Florida and go cave diving. Yes, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm an adrenaline junkie. Even now at 61, I still love high energy sports. I think it's one of the things that keeps me in snowmobiling. It's just so damn much fun. So as if parachuting at night wasn't enough, I'd go cave diving back in holes in the ground filled with water. And I really enjoyed that part. And then I got married and I moved back to Boulder, Colorado again. And we lived there for many years, started a family, raised my kids, moved out to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and got into high performance boating, the next adrenaline fix. And for many years, we lived in Havasu, and I manufactured high performance lake boats. So I would be out on the lake 5, maybe 6 days a week, all year long. In the summer, it was crazy hot. In the winter, it was pretty darn warm. Our house had no central heater, just to give you a sense of how warm it was in Lake Havasu. I had 3 different air conditioning systems, and there was no heat in the house because it simply never got cold. We're back into the road construction zone again. I swear, this is how it's going to be all the way down south today. While it wasn't originally my plan, I can tell there's going to be a secondary theme to today's story. That's going to be road construction. But then I suppose everybody knows the deal. All right, so in 2007, as the economy was beginning to crash and everything was going to hell in a handbasket, I left Arizona and moved up here to Rigby, Idaho, where I've remained ever since. And in 2008, the guy that hired me and brought me up here invited me to go out sledding for the day. I don't think he was really much of a sledder, but we went up to Island Park and we probably rented 4 or 5 sleds. We all went out for a day of snowmobiling, and that was the big day for me when I really became a snowmobiler, because by the end of that day, I was ready to buy a sled. I absolutely 100% fell in love with the sport. I got stuck all day long on the flats, in places that I look back and I just laugh at how easy that terrain was to ride, but I had no idea what I was doing, nobody to guide me, no instructions. And so I got stuck in the wide open flat spaces over and over and over again. And I loved every minute of it. I had a blast and rode all day long until I was completely worn out, turned that sled back in. And I remember being in the shop back in the rental section, and in the front of the shop, he had brand new sleds for sale. It's like, yeah, I thought about that. And it wasn't much longer before I went into our local dealer down in Rexburg, and I bought my first 3 sleds. But we still got to fast forward a little bit farther along this story. Now, those 4 kids that I was raising, over the course of time, I took each one of them out riding. My girls never really got the bug, just wasn't their cup of tea. But my boys, the boys like sledding, and they each ended up with their own snowmobile. And As the years rolled by, we did a lot of riding together. But more so than sledding, the boys caught the bug on sports cars. Now, my older son is in his 30s. He's married now, has 2 children. My younger son is in his mid-20s. He's the reason I'm going down to Lehigh today. He's in the hunt for a wife, looking forward to getting that next stage of his life going. But my older son was caught up with sports cars just like I was when I was younger. I have never owned a sports car. I've always been that practical guy. I had to make my choices between, raising a family and having children or having things. I opted for the family and kids. It's worked out real well for me, by the way. But my boys, they're leapfrogging on me. They're taking everything that I had growing up and building on that. And they've left off into their careers, and they've both been wildly successful. God bless both of them. And my older son was able to start his experience with sports cars, and he's had several. And my younger son is chasing after him. He's about 7 years younger, Christopher and Christian. So we move forward to my 60th birthday. And for my birthday, my 2 sons took me back to Porsche America and bought me a day at the Porsche track. And that day we got to spend the whole day driving around the track in brand new Porsche 911 Turbo S's. And that car was amazing. If that 930 back in 1980 was amazing, that new 911 992.2 or .1, I guess, turbo was probably a 500 horsepower vehicle and was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. Every bit as thrilling, as exciting, as, oh my gosh, as it was 45 years ago. That same sense of wonder and awe and total complete excitement. So we spent the whole day of driving. The instructors were amazing. The course was amazing. Totally pushed that car to its limits, did things that I never thought I could do in a sports car. And the 3 of us, we each did the full experience, were completely, totally in love with these Porsches. Well, by that summer, that'd be the summer of 23, my oldest son had found himself a Porsche and bought it. And my young son, who currently owned a BMW, he'd bought that car 3 years earlier, had made up his mind that he wanted a Porsche as well. And Porsches are expensive. Porsches take a lot of cash. They're very maintenance intensive. And it was going to take him a little while to get to the point where he could afford to have that Porsche. But he started saving his dollars. And about 9 months later, he was able to get an allocation, and he placed an order for a brand new custom-built Porsche coming out of Stuttgart, Germany. And that Porsche is going to be delivered today. And that's the reason I'm on my way down to Lehigh. We're going to the Lehigh Porsche dealer to pick up that car. An interesting point, just by pure coincidence, 4 years ago this weekend, he got his BMW. And 4 years later, he's selling the BMW, and he's going to be picking up that brand new Porsche. When you look back on your own past, what do you remember? Do you remember conversations? Do you remember going places? Do you remember doing things? Do you remember emotions? Do you remember how you feel? That comment I made earlier, people don't remember what you said. People don't remember what you did, but people never frickin' forget how you made them feel. And as I look back on my experience with sports cars, or my experience with snowmobiles, or skydiving, or scuba diving, there's a lot of details that fuzz out over time. But the detail that doesn't fuzz out was how I felt. What was that emotional impact to whatever the experience was? I can look back 40 years and say, I remember exactly how it felt the first time I stepped out of an airplane. I remember exactly how it felt the first time I put a regulator in my mouth and I went underwater and I breathed. Those are singular moments in my youth and childhood, as it were. And I think part of the solution to how we grow this sport of ours, this wonderful, magical winter sport that we've all fallen in love with, and some of us are more addicted to possibly than others. And I'm the first one to admit I'm absolutely addicted to snowmobiling. I spend my entire year either sledding, working on broken sleds, or preparing to go sledding. Well, we made it to Pocatello, Idaho. And we're back in the cone zone again. I swear, there is so much construction going on today. Oh, goodness. I got orange cones everywhere all around me, and the lanes are narrow. I hope you don't mind. I hope you guys enjoy the journey. I told you, this is story time on Snow West today. It's definitely going to be a little bit different of a format. In the opening, I posed a question: what does a Porsche and a turbo sled and an impressionable young teenager have to do with our future? Well, I've given you the story about the Porsche. Now let's talk about the turbo sled. Let's say we've got our young, impressionable teenager, some kid, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and we're going to take him out on his first ride. And it could also be somebody in their 20s or 30s or 40s. I don't think it necessarily is just going to be teenagers, but it might be most impactful on somebody who's young. We can take them out on a common snowmobile, run them through the paces, and let them have a fun day. Or we could put them on something that's really high performance. And like my uncle did 45 years ago, make an indelible mark on my mind, something that will last for the rest of my life. And I suspect that taking him out on that high performance turbo sled might be the better answer. Get him out in the big field, put him on the sled, and hammer it. Let him feel that incredible acceleration, the incredible rush of air, the trees flying by. Deliberately engineer and build an experience that he or she will never forget. Introduce them to a brand new sport as something that's overwhelming and exciting and thrilling and exhilarating, with our very deliberate intention to build a memory that is strong enough and intense enough that it never goes away. That they might forget who we were, they might forget where we were, they might forget when they were, but they'll always remember that, damn, that snowmobile was hot. That was so much fun. And we need to start planting some of those little seeds and know that some of those seeds are going to germinate and some of them aren't. And some might take years and some might only take weeks. And some of them we might have to take out a couple of times. And as big as a pain in the butt as it is to take out somebody who's brand new, I know I speak from experience. I ride with noobs on a regular basis. I'm weird. I admit it. I enjoy taking out new people that have never been on a snowmobile before. I have a lot of fun. I enjoy riding with strangers, and I enjoy introducing people to the sport. And I know full well that means I'm going to have my shovel out a lot of the time during the day. And I'm totally okay with that. It's sort of like taking a trail rider who's never been out west and bringing him into the mountains in Island Park or West Yellowstone, or taking him up to Driggs, or going for a ride in Cook City, or even over to Togety. There are certain inherent risks as the person taking him out on riding, but so what? That's what you do. You have a lot of fun, and you introduce people to an incredibly new version of a sport maybe they're very familiar with, but they've never had the opportunity to come out and ride in the mountains and see it from my perspective. Now, I don't want to make any false assumptions that, we're going to introduce these kids to snowmobiling or take out our friends and they're going to rush out, go buy a brand new sled the next day. That journey to getting a Porsche has taken years. It's something that had to grow and be nurtured, and, involved a lot of savings and a lot of sacrifice. Porsches are wildly expensive cars. Spending $200,000 is not uncommon on a Porsche. Spending $250,000 or $300,000 is not out of the range of normalcy. They're just incredibly expensive cars. And sleds within their own realm are just as crazy expensive. A brand new basic starter mountain sled's probably going to set you back $12,000 right now. A nice, well-equipped mountain sled, probably $16,000 to $18,000. And a top-of-the-line turbocharged, decked-out sled, probably going to be $23,000. I think the one that I ordered last year was close to $25,000 with all the bells and whistles and accessories that I ordered from Skidoo. These are expensive toys, you know. And if you're into side-by-sides or dirt bikes or jet skis, just as crazy. There's just nothing inexpensive about our sport. And that's not even, looking at the cost of all the gear that we have to have, especially if you're a mountain rider. That stuff just adds up, and it's an expensive sport. So I'm not suggesting that, yes, we're going to take people out and they're going to rush down, whip that checkbook out and go buy a brand new sled the next day or the next week. Again, I was ready to do that when I went on my first snowmobiling trip when I moved up here in 2007. But it did take me 2 years before I got from that rental point to where I walked in and I bought 3 brand new Yamahas. And there's a little transition there. We're going to need to take these guys out for a couple of rides. We're going to need to ease them into the sport, get them comfortable, keep them exposed. They've got to get in that Porsche a couple of times before that hook is completely set. Whoop. And I'm in the cone zone. I'm not paying attention here. Oh, so much construction on this dang highway today. If you've stuck with the story so far, I thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying to spin a yarn, as we used to say back in the day. Okay, so the point being, again, as I'm trying to reiterate, is we need to deliberately create experiences that get people excited about snowmobiling. In the last vlog that we did, I talked about becoming a self-appointed snowmobile ambassador. And that's really, I think, what we each have to do. We have to take it upon ourselves as ambassadors of this sport to look for and create opportunities to get people excited, to drag them out kicking and screaming into the snow, to expose them to something that maybe they would not have done themselves or have at least never done before. Or maybe even as a third choice, if they have done it, that they haven't done it in this manner, where they go out and really have fun, have something that's exciting and thrilling and, makes that lasting impression on them. Now, last weekend, my son and I drove down to the Porsche dealer to see the car come off the delivery. Porsche is one of those companies that when you place the order, you get updates every day. Oh, your car is being welded together. Your car is going to assembly. Your car is in the paint booth. Your car is on the assembly line. The wheels got put on today. The engine went in. And day by day, week by week, month by month, my son gets these little updates, and it builds the excitement and the enthusiasm and the anticipation. And we saw the boat. We saw the car get loaded on the boat. The boat went around the tip of South America, came up to the port of Los Angeles. It finally got unloaded. It got put on the truck, and the truck got driven. And we were there as they, unloaded the car. And he was able to walk up and take the plastic and peel the plastic off the Porsche. And I caught some video, and I'm going to share you the video because I want you to see the level of excitement, the level of enthusiasm. And we did all the paperwork and the documentation and all that stuff that had to be done in advance last weekend. Cleaned it, detailed it, polished it, done all the prep work. And, we'll probably get down there today. It'll be on the showroom floor, and they'll have a bag over it. And they'll do the unzipping and pull the curtain back and, do the whole bit. It's all about experience. And I'm really impressed with the way Porsche does that, because they understand they're building an experience. They want their owners to remember the day they got their first Porsche. And they're counting on the fact that, over the next 40 years, 50 years of my son's life, that he will buy another Porsche and another Porsche and another Porsche. And he'll work his way up the food chain. And I think that there's a really strong established history within that particular automobile company that's what people do. Now, I'm sure that Skidoo and Arctic Cat and Yamaha and Polaris would like to have the exact same level of brand loyalty with their sled owners. They want you to keep coming back and work your way up the food chain. But as ambassadors, whether you're a brand ambassador or not, doesn't make any difference at all, as long as you're a sled ambassador. You know, we need to figure out how to engineer those kind of moments in time for people. And it's going to be incumbent on us as individuals to do that, because the companies aren't going to do it. I think it's just too complex and too diverse for Skidoo or Polaris or Arctic Cat to engineer those moments where people are really effectively introduced to snowmobiling and introduced to the high performance sleds and taken out to the right place at the right time, and, you know, given an opportunity to squeeze that throttle and have that permagrin come on their face. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. The first time that you got on a high performance sled and you mashed that throttle and just like, whoa, you know, and you know what? It's different on a sled than it is in a car. In a car, you hit the throttle and you're pushed back in the seat, and you feel that seat hold on you, and you're up there on the wheels, and you've got hold of it, and you're enclosed in the car. And while it's impressive, it's not as visceral as being on the sled, where you've got the wind in your face and you've got the snow and there's no seat behind you, and you can sort of feel like, you know, maybe I'm going to come off this sled. It leaves a very strong gut impression on you. And we want to create those impressions as often as we possibly can. All right, the sun's out. It's time to change out the glasses. Well, if you've stuck with me this far, congratulations. You're done with the first half of the video. In the first half, I set out the background story and some thoughts on what we can do to bring new people in. In the second half of this story, I'm going to focus in on the experience that my son is having in taking delivery of this new Porsche. And I'm going to continue to try to draw analogies to snowmobiling, but I want to show you the experience that he's going through and try to meld that into sledding and how we want to build that same experience. You know, right now I'm flying down Interstate 15. I'm just coming up on the Malad Pass between Idaho and Utah. And I'm driving a Ford F-150. And I got this car 3 years ago, right in the middle of COVID. I remember placing the order for it. It's the first car I've ever ordered, brand new custom. In my life, I've always either bought something on the lot or I bought used. I'm that guy that would get a car and I drive it into the ground. My last car was an F-250. I had it for 15 years, put several 100,000 miles on it. The car before that was a Ford Bronco, one of the old big full sizes back from 87. And I think 350,000 miles, went through 3 engines, again, drove that car into the ground. I'm just the guy I buy, I keep, I hold, and I use it till there's nothing left of the car. And the reason I mention that is I'm driving hands-free right now, going down the interstate. When I got this car, one of the options was what Ford called Blue Cruise. And it's their hands-free, fully autonomous cruise control system. And I have to admit, it's freaking awesome. I so enjoy this. That's what allows me to be here and use my hands to work on this little video. It's got, you know, a whole bevy of sensors all the way around it. It's looking at all the cars and making decisions and doing a very good job of keeping me safe. And every once in a while, you may hear it start beeping and screaming at me. It does like to talk. It gives me lots of alarms. Now, I'm a self-confessed techno weenie. Make no mistake about it. I'm a total, dedicated, 100% technology guy. Big surprise. You know, I'm a forum software admin. I live in front of PCs all day long. Probably 10 to 12 hours a day, to be perfectly honest. It's the reason I drive a Skidoo. It's the reason I got that big 10.5-inch screen on there and the built-in GPS and all the software and all the bells and whistles. You know, I eat that stuff up. It's just a lot of fun. But as they say, I diverge. So from here on, I'm going to bring you along for the ride. I hope to be able to splice in some video of my son actually getting the car, and I want to capture those moments of what it's like to see a dream fulfilled. The moment where you've spent years and years planning, budgeting, saving, dreaming, wanting, and then you get that moment of fulfillment, and how that moment will last. You know, it'll be a decade or two before I can go back and revisit this, you know, and see how that moment persists with my son. But I suspect it will persist very strongly, that he will always remember the moment that he took delivery of his first Porsche. And it's that expectation on my part, based on my own personal experiences from 40 or 45 years ago, that I really think are key to how we potentially look at another avenue for growing our sport. So it's 7:30 now. I've got a couple hours ahead of me, and we'll join again when we get down there to take delivery of the car. We'll see you then. The second half of this fun Saturday's adventure. It's been a long drive, but well worth it. There we go. Find a place to park this big old truck and go take delivery.
Nice. Okay. Moved down 3 months ago. Sweet. How'd you talk and treat me after the trip? All right. I mean, after your day, it's gonna be a little better. Yeah, right? Hey, dude, thanks again. You ready? Yep. Let's do this. Oh, man. She shines up nice. Look at that, dude. Oh my gosh. Should we start it up? Let's do it. Yes. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. Oh my god. Oh my god. I didn't realize I was meant to mention, and so he's way more.
Well, it's Sunday night. Weekend's over with. The Porsche got delivered. We went up for drives. We had fun. Took it to the racetrack even. Did a couple of hot laps while we were there. And I'm driving back up to Idaho now. Big storm brewing outside. Well, you saw my story and you heard my thoughts. You saw the smiles on my son's face. Now it's up to you to tell me, what do you think? Does my theory hold any water? Is the idea of taking a young man or a young woman and introducing them to snowmobiling in a manner that makes a huge, long-lasting, lifetime impression likely to be a seed that we want to plant, that may, over the course of years, yield more members, more participants, more people coming out to join us in the middle, coming out to join us in the winter in the middle of the snow to play in the snowflakes and have a good time and become active riders. As always, I would really like to hear from you. One of the things that I really pride myself on is I read your comments, every single one of them. And I try to either reply in text message or reply with at least an acknowledgement icon. Let me know what you think. Jump in on snowwest.com, give me your comments, make a comment on the YouTube video, or here on Facebook. But I would like to hear from you. I'd like to know, am I completely wrong? Am I off base? Was this a total waste of time and effort to edit and put this whole video together? Or is there maybe a route forward? Maybe we've missed something in how we introduce people to the sport. Maybe there's something different we could be doing that'll give us a higher rate of return on our investment. In either case, I look forward to your comments. I'm Christopher from snowwest.com. I'm your forum admin. We'll see you later on.